Welcome, friends, to the weekend worship service of the First Unitarian Church of Salt Lake City. What a gift to be alive today, to be witness to the lengthening of the days and the return of spring, and to be a part of this blooming community of free thinkers and seekers. Whoever you are, wherever you are welcome with us. If you're new to our church community or visiting us for the very first time, you are especially welcome. I invite you to visit our website, slcuu.org, or our social media channels to learn more about us and to find out how you can become part of what we're doing here at First Church. Now, this weekend, no one will know if you're late to church because you can watch the service whenever you want to when it's virtual. That's kind of nice, right? We have to get our pandemic blessings wherever we can. But if you don't want to be late for our live coffee hour on Zoom, we encourage you to spring forward with your clocks for daylight savings time and then join us at 11 a.m. for our live coffee hour. Just a couple of announcements as we get started today. First, on Sunday afternoon, March 14th, and that might be today for you, we'll have another opportunity to learn about the proposed 8th principle of Unitarian Universalism. You can come to the coffee hour at 11 a.m., then take a lunch break and join me right back on the very same link at 1 p.m., learn where the principle stands for adoption by our association, what we as a church can do to support it, and what it all means. Next, I want to thank everyone who attended our live Celebration Sunday service last week and give you a praise report about our progress. I am delighted to tell you that we have received 75 pledge cards or online pledges for a total so far of $217,000. I also want to tell you how far we've come on some of our other goals. We set a goal of 20 new pledges, and so far we've received 4 new pledges. Welcome on board to you. And I also want you to know that 32 families have committed to increase their pledge for next year, and of those, 23 families are making an increase of 20% or more. That means that we are already almost halfway to our goal of 50 families increasing 20% or more. I am ecstatic about this progress and humbled by your generosity. Thank you so much. Now, we still have a ways to go. We're just over a third of the way to our goal of $610,000. And if you attended our service last week, then you know just what a stretch this is for us. But it's achievable, and I know that we can do it. Just look at the progress we've made so far. So if you turned in your pledge card early, but now you're thinking you'd like to give just a little more next year, it's no trouble. You can just contact our administrator, Stephanie Park, in the church office, or send her an email and let her know that you're feeling inspired to up your pledge. Once again, we're asking everyone to make their pledge commitments using the mail-in card or our online donation portal by April 1st. And to every single one of our donors, no matter what size your gift, we are so grateful for you. You are helping us to build an amazing future here in Salt Lake City. Thank you. And now, let us begin our service by lighting the chalice today with these words by J. Abernathy. We affirm that love is our greatest purpose. Accepting one another is the truest form of faithful living. The search for truth is our constant star. We pledge our hearts, minds, and hands to challenge injustice with courage, to find hope in times of fear, and to live out our Unitarian Universalist values every day as a beloved community. Thus do we covenant with each other and with all that is sacred in life.
My favorite musical of all time is Into the Woods. For those of you who are unfamiliar, 1, go watch it right after you finish watching worship. It's amazing. 2, the basic plot of the musical is the traditional story of a hero's quest through the woods to find different objects needed for a witch to break a curse. On this quest, our heroes encounter different characters from fairy tales, living through their own stories as they become entangled with our heroes, who don't always act so heroically, and what happens after your quest is over. Towards the end of the musical, there's a song titled Your Fault. This is the song that plays in my head anytime someone mentions acting responsibly to me. In the song, the characters break down all of the choices they have made that have affected one another in an attempt to remove responsibility for the consequences of their actions. But it isn't my fault, says Jack from Jack and the Beanstalk. I was given those beans. You persuaded me to trade away my cow for beans. And without those beans, there had been no stalk to get up to the giants in the first place. The baker, our hero, replies, wait a minute. Magic beans for a cow so old that you had to tell a lie to sell it, which you told? Were they worthless beans? Were they oversold? Oh, and tell us who persuaded you to steal that gold. The song goes on, trading blame from Jack to the baker to the witch, Cinderella, Red Riding Hood, and on and on and on. Everyone plays a part in the story and the song, their actions interconnected to one another. As I said in my synopsis, our heroes from these familiar tales are not always acting responsibly or taking responsibility for their actions. You see, they didn't have our 7th principle there, reminding them of our interconnected web. We can and are called to act responsibly and take responsibility for ourselves, regardless of our age. We do not live in a bubble, and we are connected to the world. We teach our children from a very small age to clean up after they play, say sorry when they have hurt someone. We don't litter, we wear our masks, and we're kind to animals and each other, and on and on and on. We all play a part. And as part of this web, when I am acting responsibly in our world, it has a rippling effect. Now, going back to the song, what if the baker had been honest with Jack and didn't trick him for the cow? What if Jack had never planted the beans or stolen the gold? As is pointed out in the song, though, the blame isn't important. What's important is acting responsibly with the choices we have. That's the lesson I think we all need to be reminded of. May it be so.
March is Women's History Month in the United States, and it comes at a time when women are facing unusually dire circumstances. In our nation, 4 times as many women have dropped out of the labor force as men in the past year, with half of those women saying that their reason for leaving their jobs was a lack of childcare options. Among healthcare workers in the United States, those who have become infected with the coronavirus on the job are 3 times more likely to be women. And women who are caregivers are at greater risk of negative effects on their physical and mental health due to the stress of the pandemic. We are writing women's history right now, and it is not likely to be a happy chapter. Every one of us owes our lives and ourselves to women, the women ancestors who dreamed us into being, the women of our societies who collected and cultivated wisdom and shared it forward as keepers of the traditions, the women of our families who nurtured us and challenged us and loved us. We owe our lives to women in our communities who do an outsized portion of the care and nurture of human beings who often are disrespected and devalued by our society. Children, the elderly, the disabled, themselves, and each other. We owe our future to women who are now growing and yet to be, girls who are watching us, to see how we value the women around us, girls who are learning to navigate this misogynistic world, girls who believe in themselves for now, but are given reasons not to every day, girls who receive the message in overt and covert ways that they don't matter as much as boys, and that they won't matter as much as men when they are grown. We have the power to break these generational curses. We, women and men and non-binary folks, have the power to cast counterspells that blast the stone walls that generations past built around gender roles. We have the power to lift up the stories of women that have been lost to history and to venerate them and retell them to our children and grandchildren. We have not only the power, but the obligation to pass on to the next generation a world that makes more space and more freedom and more options for women and for people of all genders, because misogyny hurts everyone. If you are a woman, may this blessing be upon you today. Courage to break every ceiling that would limit you, hands that would lift and support you, winds of inspiration to widen your horizons and unleash your dreams, and the systems and structures that will make everything possible for you. If you are a non-binary person, may this blessing be upon you today. Courage to explore gender just as divers explore the ocean and astronauts explore the heavens. Hands that would honor and protect you. A willing audience to hear about the territories you've explored and what you found there, what you've discovered about the frontiers of human possibility. And if you are a man, may this blessing be upon you today. Wakefulness to the gifts you have been given by women, brokenheartedness at the unearned privileges you bear, courage to explore how misogyny has hurt you, courage to surrender your privileges and join with women and non-binary people in forging a new way forward, and a blessing for every child. May the history of women in the world strengthen you, encourage you, inspire you, and may you fulfill every dream of your precious heart. Amen.
Well, I'd also like to welcome everybody to our worship service today, and it's really with a great deal of gratitude that I want to express to all of you for being a part of our worship service here at the First Unitarian Church. I'd like to start today with a quote by E.B. White. It may sound a little bit familiar to some of you or many of you, but it's certainly something that I think we can all resonate with. E.B. White said, "I arise in the morning, torn between a desire to improve the world and a desire to savor the world. This makes it hard to plan my day." Who can't relate to that? I think, it really is an area of concern for most of us that warrants our attention, especially in light of the unconscionable disparities in society that have been so magnified during the year of COVID. E.B. White suggests, rather playfully, that we face some pretty tough choices every day. We awaken each morning to a troubled world. And yet there is so much beauty for the taking. How do we delegate our time and spend our days? Complicating matters is the profound awareness that far too few people have the privilege of savoring the world. Not many can tend to, shall we say, matters of the soul. And this creates then a sense of urgency to meet the social challenges of our times. And yet there is that inner thirst that is asking to be quenched. I've been trying to noodle through this for quite a long time. I want to be on the front lines in terms of saving the world, but there's also a need, and I know we all feel it, to replenish the spirit. And so I am torn, much like E.B. White, about the right steps to take. And this can feel very paralyzing when you dwell on it for just a little while. Now, in my lifelong involvement in Unitarianism, especially the last 46 years as a minister, I experienced this tension all the time. This tension between alleviating injustice on the one hand and working on my own personal development on the other. Much of this church's mission, and of course my ministry in general, are rooted in a commitment to apply political pressures in order to give voice to the poor and marginalized in society. Now, in religious terms, we might say that we strive to make life's blessings more available to everyone. And yet, despite this commitment to level the playing field for the greater common good, there are also stirrings within that demand some attention. Now, is this a contradiction? I don't know. Minimally, it's a perfect setup for guilt, don't you think? You may have felt it yourselves. I wonder, of course, as most of us do, whether these two compelling forces must be mutually exclusive. But the nagging concern for me is that by taking precious time for myself, I am unwittingly subtracting time from engaging more fully in that work for justice. Former UUA President Bill Schultz put it this way: does private spirituality fail to engender a passion for justice? That's the question we may all need to ask ourselves. Does private spirituality fail to engender a passion for justice? Well, of course, we all have to arrive at our own answers, at least if we want to go about planning our day. I can't help but believe that there's always been this push-pull when the obvious need to engage in the world's injustice collides with the desire to pay attention to one's own life. Now, Voltaire would call that attention to one's life cultivating a garden. He said we must all cultivate our gardens, and we do this in order to empower ourselves. Well, I am perhaps too much of a Unitarian to turn spirituality into a form of self-absorption. However, there's always that risk, don't you think? There's always that risk. None of us actually wants to flee the world, which is what happens to a lot of people who are engaged in spirituality. In a sense, it's that they're taking flight from the world. That's something we don't want to do. Our religion, in fact, calls for us to engage in the world. But spirituality can easily anesthetize us against the sorrow, the tumult, the powerlessness of our neighbors. Our second UU principle reminds us that our religion rightly calls us into action, that we must promote justice and equity and compassion in all human relations. But this is no small order if we take that seriously. So what then? Is our church asking us to relinquish our spiritual or personal pursuits in order to create a more just world? Probably not. But living our second principle will require a lot more of us than perhaps we are even ready to commit. So I've placed this dilemma or conundrum under the umbrella of ethics and spirituality. Both are absolutely paramount as a means to leading a purposeful life. And yet, they can be held in tension with each other. Scaled back to perhaps a very simple differentiation, I understand ethics to mean acting responsibly towards others, and spirituality to mean acting responsibly to oneself. The caveat is that I am, and I'm sure most of us are, keenly aware of the elitism and having the freedom just to ponder my needs for a fulfilling life. That's really quite an extraordinary luxury, don't you think? But some people tell me that taking care of yourself first is like putting on your own oxygen mask in a plane before attending others. I don't quite see it like that. Now, savoring the world may make me a stronger person to work towards a just world, but is there, think about it, is there really enough time to do both well? Can we do both well? Am I better prepared to tear down the structures of white supremacy after, let's say, attending a Zen spirituality workshop. In all honesty, I don't really think that's the case. I've used, and this is where it really weighs on me, I have used a lot of time just to get myself to a better place. It occurs to me that this is ultimately a hard scrabble because religion holds up both spirituality and ethics as the consummate values of faith. Well then, is religion telling us to multitask? Religion saying, well, ethically, you are responsible for transforming this pitiful world into the kingdom of God. And incidentally, you've got a lot of spiritual work to do on yourself. The great theologian, he's not a Unitarian, still think he's great, Reinhold Niebuhr, acknowledges that this can all get pretty complicated. Now, most fundamental is the realization that we live in an imperfect world. And maybe we need to just let that sink in for a moment. We all live in an imperfect world. Now, Niebuhr represents what is called Christian realism. Yeah, wow, thanks, I needed that. That's pretty realistic that we live in an imperfect world. And then he goes on to say, in a rather curious way, he is an established Christian theologian, he says, Jesus is of no help whatsoever. He says it's impossible to remain faithful to the teachings of Jesus and be politically responsible at the same time. He claims that Jesus' ethical ideal is too rigorous. In fact, it's too perfect to be applied to the economic and political issues of our day. Jesus does not offer, a real tangible model for society today, because if we lived according to Jesus' rules, we would have no laws other than the law of love. It's just not possible in today's world to love your neighbor as yourself, and that would be the prevailing rule of law. It just wouldn't work. Although I do like to think about that possibility every once in a while. It has its appeal. So Niebuhr says, so forget about this, the Jesus ideal. It is up to us. It's up to humanity to create a system of justice. How important that is. We are responsible for creating a system of justice, and that system of justice is ultimately what will save society. And then he really nails it all. He says, there are limitations imposed on all of us. And what does he assume is that limitation that's imposed on us that somehow detracts from working on the system of justice? He says, we are distracted by our own self-interests. So there's the work that needs to be done. It's called saving the world. And then, according to Niebuhr, there's this distraction about me, our own self-interests. That, he claims, makes it impossible to embrace the social mandate that social justice really commands. I think Unitarianism, historically, has come down mostly on the side of ethics rather than spirituality. After all, we are known for our social action, not for cultivating spirituality. And this may be a reason why we are regarded in general as spiritually or even theologically bereft. In fact, the joke about this apparent void in Unitarianism is raised in the question, if you were arrested for being a Unitarian, would there be enough evidence to convict you? Send me your answers. Email me your answers to that one. I'd love to know. The mission of Unitarian Universalism is clearly articulated again in our second principle, that it's striving for justice, equity, and compassion in human relations. I think we're very proud of that principles and really admire that it plays such a pivotal role in our whole religious system, or just our religious schematics. But this too can be taken to an extreme, as was evident more than 400 years ago in 16th century Poland. Now, this is an amazing chapter in our history. I don't think many people realize this, but it's worth a brief retelling. Faustus Socinus, influenced by the Unitarian King John in Transylvania, led a movement of 3,000 Polish religious liberals who referred to themselves as Socinians. Now, they developed a really interesting theology. They'll say Jesus saved, but not by his death on the cross. Jesus saved by the persuasive power of his life on earth. Now, I don't think any one of us would disagree, but now it gets hard. Try to place yourself for a moment in a Socinian community, basically a Unitarian fellowship in Poland almost 500 years ago. Now, your church emphasizes a covenant, but it's not only among people within the community, like we do, but covenants that included responsibilities to people outside of the religious community. And the reason for that was the belief that their spiritual interests were served only through the application of their ethical beliefs. Let me say that again. They believed that their spiritual interests were served only through the application of their ethical beliefs. So this is what happened. They had to demonstrate their commitment to loving their neighbor. This was kind of their litmus test, a test of their faith, whether or not they were practicing their religion faithfully, full-time, every day. It's kind of too bad that they didn't have a chance to read Niebuhr, who proclaimed that you simply can't reach that level of perfection as Jesus instructed. It just doesn't work in the real world. But they tried. Man, they tried. They tried by fully committing their lives to social justice. Now, members of these Socinian congregations evaluated each other at meetings held 4 times a year, always on a Saturday. Now, these were not perfunctory evaluations, but very strict and intense. They had to hold up to the scrutiny of their fellow Socinians, and then to confess their sins in failing to live up to the expected social accountability throughout all of their daily habits and exercises. That's pretty intense. I'm sure we have no trouble believing that Socinianism soon died out. This this exclusive commitment to improving this world, maybe it's just not humanly possible. Unitarians have thankfully moved away from such stringent demands. Do I say thankfully for selfish reasons? Relieved that there might still be a little bit of time left for me to take care of my needs to savor the world. Actually, I find this very interesting. It's in the Quran that makes it very clear where our priorities should be. And in the Quran, we read that working one day for justice is better than 60 years of prayer. Can you imagine putting that on the scale? 1 day of justice, 60 years of prayer. And I think that's right. And I bet you think that's right. In fact, we know that's right. But it's so lofty. It's scripture. It's wisdom coming from the mountaintop. I'm back with E.B. White wondering how to plan my day. I do believe that it's primarily through Unitarianism placing a very powerful emphasis on ethics, that is, acting responsibly towards others, that when you come right down to it, I do feel I must respond when the world beckons. And this is our history, which I feel needs to remain our focal point. Now, let me give you another kind of a Unitarian example. I don't know how many of you have been to Cambridge, but if you have, I'm sure you noticed, or if you may go to Cambridge, take a look at Cambridge Commons. And in the Commons, you will find a statue, rather elegant statue, of the 19th century Unitarian senior senator from Massachusetts. He was a fiery fellow who lent us the metaphor of the dinner table. This is what he famously said. There are dinners without appetites at one end of the table, and appetites without dinners at the other end. Some people have too much and don't know what to do with it. Some people have too little and don't know how to get enough. So placed in the context of today's sermon, we may want to savor the world, extract from it all the delicious possibilities afforded to us by an abundant world. But what good is it really? What good is that when we are plainly aware that these splendid gifts are not available to all? In other words, what about all those people at the other end of the table? Now, what Unitarianism has ultimately awakened in me is a sensitivity, or maybe, to be honest, it's really what it has awakened in me is a dread, a dreadful fear of becoming self-indulgent. That is, I really try so hard to guard against the self-indulgence as I figure out or try to plan my day. I know I'm not alone. Now, I think Unitarianism may have learned a few things from those Socinians, namely, that it's perhaps more important to be effective in working to transform the world rather than denying oneself all the time, every bit of time, to reflect, to be inspired, to feed the wellsprings of the Spirit. I think Unitarianism is saying we need clarity in order to act. And it's going to be pretty hard to argue against that. Spirituality can give us that clarity. There's the line, as long as we don't become self-indulgent. The tension between ethics and spirituality is always alive, so present before most of us. But I think we work conscientiously and deliberately to preclude our spiritual work from ever eclipsing our passion for justice. In fact, it may even feed the passion as we learn, well, among many things, as we learn mindfulness in our practice. So I do take Niebuhr's words to heart. There are limitations imposed on us, like our own self-interest. We know that to be true. And we feel it every day, just wondering if we should save the world or savor the world. So be it.